Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So, we put together this webinar series to answer questions we get all the time about the managed print world. Our goal is to make things clear and more approachable. No sales pitch, just real talk. Today, we're going to dive into the most common topics, what it really means to work with a dealer versus buying direct from a manufacturer. And our presenter today has been in the print industry. He was a little hesitant for us to share this, but for over 30 years, and he has seen it all. He's here to share what he's learned and to help you make better choices for your business. So take it away, Pat. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Again, appreciate everybody taking the time to, sit down and share this with us. And again, I've been doing this for, well, I guess over 3 decades. We can put the math on it. One of the caveats I will put out there, again, we're going to talk a little bit today about, dealer versus direct. And I will put the caveat on there that I am biased. I have worked both in the direct channel and I have worked in the dealer channel. And yes, today I currently work in the dealer channel. So there is a bit of bias with everything that I'm presenting, but our goal truly is we get a lot of questions when we're in the field and we're talking to businesses and we're helping businesses make smart decisions, for the direction that they want to go to meet their copy print, needs and services. And this is a question that comes up, I won't say frequently, but frequently enough. Depending on geography, size of business, those types of things, we see it more frequently in some areas than we do in others. And a lot of times there's not a really good understanding of what our industry is. And hey, that's understandable. You folks are doing what you do. You're running your business. It's very important. Not a lot of people have expertise in copy and print. It's what we do. We do it really well. And whether we're in the dealer or the direct, it's our entire careers. And we stay focused on trying to make sure we have a good understanding and coach people through, what's best for their business. So I'm really going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to give a little bit of history on it. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the trends that we see in the industry. I'm going to lay out, hey, what the direct is and what their drivers are, what the dealer is, what their drivers are, and how we work together and how we collaborate in the space to provide products and services to businesses, throughout the U.S. and actually, globally, because these models carry themselves to other countries as well. And then talk about the differences in hopes that it at least gives you some insight and helps you make a little bit better decisions on what's best for your business and what you're trying to accomplish. So first and foremost, wait a minute, my history slide. Oh no, there it is. Okay, my history slide, there it is. I want to talk a little bit about this, and I hadn't actually looked this up prior to putting some of this content together. But the first patent for a copier, and I'm using quotation fingers because it was hardly a copier. It seemed like it was more of a fireplace from the articles that I read about it, was in 1937, a guy by the name of Chester Carlson. And he had actually developed the process around electrophotography. And specifically, he was using all sorts of chemicals. He was using handkerchiefs and cloths. They didn't even really have standard paper. They were using a wax paper. But he actually invented the first machine that could take an image and transfer that image to another substrate, and actually using, electrophotography to pull that process off. And of course, the challenges with using this process were there were a lot of chemicals. B, they were very flammable materials they were working with. And C, they caught on fire all the time. And he actually spent about 8 years after he issued the first patent on it working, to improve the process. And he actually started to work with a company by the name of Haloid. And Haloid helped him take that process from electrophotography to what they called xerography. And Haloid, who ultimately became Haloid Xerox and then long-term became Xerox using the xerographic process, which was the name that they put on it, was really the advent of this industry, as we know it today, or led to where we are today. So in 1955, Haloid actually made the first device that would take an image and copy it and put it on sheets of paper, just standard substrate paper, And then they launched the product in 1959, and it was actually called the Xerox 914. And the reason it was called the 914 is because it could handle a sheet of paper that was 9 inches to 14 inches. So that was the actual substrate that they could support on that product. And they went to market with this product. And in 1961, they started actually working actively towards distribution. And from 1961 to about 1969, they grew the company from $2 million to $22 million, which I'm not a currency expert. I don't know what cost of living was back in the 1960s. I know it was a lot less than it is today, but became a very significant company. And as this was happening, it caught the eye of other manufacturers in the industry that they thought, hey, this might be a really good opportunity to expand our business. And Ricoh and Canon, being two of the earlier ones to adopt into the space, started looking at, hey, how are we going to get involved in this market space? And one of the challenges is at the time, no different than facial tissues are called Kleenex to everybody. Xerox machines were literally called Xerox machines because everybody knew the devices that they saw from Xerox because those were the only ones in market. And they were finding they had a really hard time entering into the market space, trying to compete with really the only company people knew that did this process or sold these pieces of equipment. And Canon was actually one of the first ones that went to the table and said, hey, I want to set up a distribution model that's different than Xerox. So Xerox was a US based company. They had a big presence in the United States of America. They were the only ones selling the product. They were starting to go international with the products because they saw the business needs elsewhere. But again, Canon, who wanted to enter the space, Ricoh, who wanted to enter the space, and even companies like Konica and Minolta, which again, two different companies of the same company today, Konica Minolta, they actually merged together. But these organizations were looking at ways of getting into the space. So they actually created the first dealer channel. And the whole point behind the dealer channel was providing local sales, local service, having a local presence, and getting a better reach inside of areas that Xerox didn't have locations, they didn't have technicians, they didn't have people. And again, these devices, as they are today, are relatively expensive pieces of equipment that were an important part of how people operated their business. And when they go down, it's a problem. It slows the business processes down inside of organizations, and having local service, local sales, local support became very important to the market space. So when you look at, hey, where did it come from? It came from the direct side. It came from Xerox. And where did it go? It went to a lot of it went to the independent dealer network. And this is sort of how it got developed. And over the years, we've created, what I think is a pretty good ecosystem of working together, both with the manufacturers and with the dealer channel, to try to provide the services that companies are looking for. Specifically, as we talk about the direct, right? Because the direct has some very important roles in the industry. Again, the major manufacturers in the business today are Xerox, Fujifilm, which we don't hear a lot about Fujifilm in the United States of America. You might think of them like a Kodak or a film company. They are that, but they're actually the largest manufacturer in our industry. They actually manufacture about 41% of the engines that are placed worldwide. So they're a very large impact on it. And then you've got Canon, HP, Ricoh, Sharp, Konica Minolta, Lexmark, Toshiba, Kyocera, and there are others like Brother, Epson, lots of companies in the industry, but these are the major players in the space, and they're really what we would consider to be the tier 1, tier 2 manufacturers in the space that have the vast majority of the market space. Most of these companies are Japanese-owned companies, and they do have U.S. business entities. So they'll operate as manufacturers. Again, a lot of them out of Japan, but then they open up U.S. business entities to support the market space. And they do that in Australia and Europe and India and other countries across the world. But, with the people that we have on the call today, it's really about, hey, what does the U.S. version of that look like for the manufacturers? They are the ones that do all the R&D, they do all the design, they do all the development, they do all the manufacturing. They actually manufacture all of the equipment, they manufacture all the parts, all the supplies, and they're the ones that are providing the distribution for that. So they're actually getting the products for us. getting them to the U.S., making them available to us. They also control the distribution models. So as independent dealers, we have to have authorizations to sell and support the product, and there's minimum specifications that we have to meet to make sure that we're representing their product properly and servicing their product properly. The direct manufacturers themselves do have sales and support entities. Most of them are in major metropolitan areas, and in the industry, we'll call that NFL cities. Hopefully that's relatively self-explanatory. If you've got a NFL team in your market space, you probably have the manufacturers representing themselves directly in those space, and those are the areas that they'll have technicians, salespeople, offices, distribution points, the whole 9 yards. And they also have a national reach. And this is one of the things that's beneficial with the direct, is the directs do also have global reach. So where the dealer channels aren't going to, have the capabilities of supporting something in, India or Korea or the Philippines or maybe even England, the direct manufacturers do have business entities in those market spaces that they can activate into to support services. So that's something that you might want to take into consideration. They also have all the engineers. Again, they're the ones designing the products. They're the ones updating the products, managing firmware, so on and so forth. They also generate pricing structures. One of the benefits that we get in working with the directs is the directs do work with a lot of the federal agencies as well as work with the states to provide specific pricing programs. So a lot of GPO contracts, state contracts, federal contracts, and they'll negotiate that pricing on the behalf of not only the direct entities, but also the dealership channel to make those programs available to those types of businesses that qualify for those programs. And then they establish the distribution channels. They set up the channels to ensure that their products can be supported throughout the entire nation with some consistency. And their main drivers, I said I was biased, so I'll say it. Their main drivers are to keep the factories operating at an optimal level. And when we're all beneficiaries of that, being able to manufacture the product in a cost-effective and consistent way is important for all of us. And they're really the ones that provide that. On the flip side of it, I want to talk a little bit about the dealer channel. So we talked about where it came from, and it was really trying to provide a bigger umbrella of service and support local. And again, in the early 1970s, several of the manufacturers got involved in helping step up independent businesses. So all the dealer channel, for the most part, there's some caveats. There's some equity-owned companies in the industry, but for the most part, we're privately owned businesses. They have owners or ownership structure. You'll see, some equity ownership, some ESOPs, but a lot of them are family-owned businesses. We are customers of the manufacturer, and we can talk about what that means a little bit. So, we don't actually make the product, we sell and support the products, and we become customers of that, and that helps us with leverage on the behalf of our customers. So as we scale in size and we scale in opportunity, the manufacturers love to have us representing their product when we're doing a good job of it. So the manufacturers are typically all coming to us and saying like, hey, will you sell our products? And we'll be like, well, here's the needs we have and here's what we can do. And the manufacturers we do business with want to maintain our business. So again, that gives us leverage with costing, that gives us leverage with support, that gives us leverage with direct integrations with the manufacturers. So there's one of the things that we pick up from that. And the dealer channel doesn't service the entire US. So you could go anywhere in the United States of America and you could buy a product, whether it was a Xerox product or a Canon product or a Sharp product or a Ricoh product or an HP product. And again, relatively expensive pieces of equipment that will absolutely break. They just do. They're really cool devices, but they do an awful lot and they're very complex on the inside. So support becomes a really important part of that mechanism. And we're the ones that are providing support throughout the entire country. So even if you do business with a direct manufacturer, there will be areas in the country that they work with the dealer channel to provide support where they don't have technicians or they don't have the ability to support, so delivery, install, setup, training, as well as ongoing service, supplies, the whole 9 yards. And again, the dealer channel is a really good channel. We work well with each other. Again, we want to lay an umbrella over the whole country. We get together as dealers all the time, talking about levels of service, what our customers are looking for, how we can work together to give consistency across the U.S. Because there isn't a single dealer in the United States of America that has footprint across the entire country. We patch together as a group through what we call the interterritorial process, to make sure that we can deliver consistency and service across the entire country for any of our customers that we have. And we work to help each other out really, really well. Our primary goals, because we don't manufacture anything, is really about customer satisfaction. We exist based on the fact that we do a good job taking care of our customers and they continue to do business with us. So customer satisfaction is our priority as opposed to keeping a factory busy. We like the factories busy because that means that our business is well, but we're really focused on what we're doing to meet our customers' needs and exceed our customer needs to retain our customers. That's what's important to us. Some of the things that we're seeing in the industry or trends that we've seen, over time, again, if you went back to the 1970s, it was Xerox, and then as the dealer channel started to get stood up, some of the manufacturers would put some direct locations inside of major metros, and in some cases, they expanded even further into the space. We're seeing consolidation inside that, and a couple of things that we're seeing in that consolidation. First off, the manufacturers themselves are consolidating. Just recently, and I say just recently, it's probably been 4 or 5 years now, but like as an example, Samsung was a pretty big player in the space. HP bought Samsung, and they did that to bolster their product offering and the larger copiers. They're really well known for their printers and for their smaller MFPs, but big copiers were never a thing that they've been able to get a good foothold on. They bought Samsung to take some of that IP as well as develop the product and some of the distribution around it. Fuji actually separated the relationship with Xerox. Fuji actually manufactured the vast majority of the Xerox products. And back in 23, that relationship was severed. And when I say severed, they moved on to doing things a different ways. Xerox is looking to change that manufacturing distribution model. We just saw about a year and a half ago that there was a merger between Ricoh and Toshiba. So again, two of the larger manufacturers in the space are joining together to try to help, build a little bit more consistency across it. And each of them had their strengths, and they're sharing their strengths to have a stronger product. And then Konica Minolta in the last year actually moved into a joint venture with Fuji. So again, a lot of movement in the space from the major manufacturers, and I think we'll continue to see a lot of that. And then on the dealer side of it, we're seeing consolidation in that space also. Again, a lot of these companies were actually formed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The vast majority of the companies that are in the industry today, have all been around for, 20, 25, 30, in some case, 40 years. And ownership inside those organizations are starting to age for whatever reason. Sometimes their kids don't want to pick up the business, or they don't have somebody they can hand the business off to. And they look to the relationships they've had inside the dealer channel with some of the more successful dealers and sell their companies to them. There's also competitive pressures in the space. Again, there are a number of dealers across the U.S. that have had the fortune and done a good enough job to grow themselves to the point that they've got better leverage with the manufacturer, better costing models, which makes it more difficult for some of the smaller business to be as competitive. That's tightened up margins a bit inside of the industry. And the other thing that's really happened a lot, and it's happened in the last 15 years or so, is there's been a significant increase in the complexity of what these devices do. And some of the smaller organizations just haven't had the ability to keep up with what's happening from a technology standpoint and have the resources in place to be able to meet what some of the customers' needs are. And again, that's created some consolidation. So we also see on the manufacturing side that the manufacturers are pulling back into there was a time in the industry where manufacturers were actually buying dealerships, and they were actually increasing their presence in that. That actually stopped about 5 or 6 years ago. They're no longer buying dealers anymore, and they're actually pulling back. And as an example, Ricoh, who's one of the larger manufacturers that we work with, they sold off a bunch of their customer base to us. Konica Minolta sold off a bunch of their customer base. So where they had direct, entities, they had direct customers, they had direct support and technicians. They're backing away from that spaces, and we can see them continuing to consolidate into, the NFL cities. And I think we could end up seeing something very much like the automobile manufacturing model, where you've got, Ford, GM, Toyota, fill in the blank, the automobile manufacturers, but they don't actually own any of the stores that sell them. So the dealer channel inside the automotive manufacturing business is all independent. And I think that over time, we'll continue to see, the business moving more and more towards that, or this industry moving more and more towards that, where you'll see a lot bigger presence of the independent dealer in the space, providing the sales and support in there, because the channel's developed to the point that I think it could do a really good job. And the manufacturers don't necessarily want to manage the overhead of having to maintain all of the locations, employees, technicians, so on and so forth. Couple of things that I want to go through, and again, food for thought, things to think about. What are the differences side by side? I talked a little bit about both the business units and how they operate. What does that mean to you? What are the differences? So when we look at ownership and control, the direct channel, these are all large organizations, most of them, again, Japanese-based companies. They're sitting on the stock market, and again, they are the ones that are manufacturing it. So, the benefit they get from that is they get a lot of control over the devices, the mechanisms, the sales strategies, the pricing, and customer interaction. So again, even from us, from a standpoint that we work with the manufacturers, they're the ones that are setting the tone on pricing. They're the ones that we work with to get better pricing in situations that have scale and make sense. The flip side of it, on the independent dealer network, these are locally owned businesses in most cases. These are independently owned organizations. And again, some of the footprints are extending, but they have very local presences. They have people in the market space, and we are all customers of the OEM. The benefit on the dealer side of the channel is we have a lot more autonomy on how we move forward in the industry, the things we can do for customers. We have a lot more flexibility in our programs. We aren't worried so much about the consistency across a global market space. We're worried more about, hey, what does our customer need? What are their needs inside of our space? So that's sort of the difference between the ownership models and the control. As far as the product lines, one of my favorite slides. Okay, I'm absolutely going to pick on the manufacturers right now. If you talk to somebody that works for the Ricoh Direct, you can get one guess on what's the best product in the market. Right? Ricoh. If you talk to somebody from Canon, it's going to be Canon. If you talk to somebody from Konica, it's going to be Konica Minolta. If you talk to somebody from the independent dealer network and say, hey, what's the best product in the market? You should be getting a question. And that question should be, I don't know, it depends on what your needs are. Let's sit down and take a look at, what your business needs are, what the applications are, how you want to utilize the product, the locations of where the products are going to be placed, what your actual needs are. So again, the direct channel is going to do a really good job of representing a product and creating really good consistency across the country, and even from a global standpoint, where the independent dealer, many of us carry many different product lines, and we do that so that we can take the best of breed from any of the manufacturer to try to fit what the business needs are of the companies that we're talking to. And then the other aspect of it is we have a lot more flexibility with the integrations and the solutions that these devices will be connecting to, and how they're operating inside your infrastructure, because we can pick what solution best meets your needs, not necessarily what solution we manufacture and we sell because it's what we make. Customer relationships. So typically, what you're going to see inside the direct channel is that they're going to have a high level of focus in enterprise business. So Fortune 100, sometimes Fortune 500, but they're looking at enterprise size organizations and organizations with full national coverage and oftentimes global reach. And the benefit they're going to be able to provide with that is they're going to be able to get a really good standardized approach over large areas of geography, either nationally as well as globally. The independent dealer channel has a much higher focus inside, the mid-sized market space or SMB, so small to mid-sized business. And then the larger dealers, and there's 30, 40 dealers across the country that cover very, very large footprints. They also will work really well inside of that enterprise space, but not going to have as much from a global standpoint. But again, we can allow a more personalized approach. So organizations that are looking for something that's more custom to what their needs are, as opposed to something that's very consistent across footprint, the independent dealer channel would be a place to look. As far as service and support goes, and I'll pull the curtain back on this one completely. If you have a national footprint, you cannot do business with just the direct. You cannot do business with just the dealer. We all have to work together to accomplish that, right? And so we both have OEM trained technicians. Whether you're the OEM and you're training them yourself, or you're the dealer and you go to the OEM and do training. And again, some of the larger organizations such as ourselves, we actually have people on staff that do OEM training. So we have train the trainer programs where we work with the manufacturer to be able to OEM train our own technicians. That you're going to get similar technicians either way. The biggest difference is footprint that can be supported. And this is an area where we all sort of have to work together. The direct leans on us. We lean on the direct. We lean on the other dealership in the country to make sure that we're getting the consistency of support that our customers are looking for from a nationwide standpoint. Last piece on the differences that I wanted to talk about is what the actual market strategy is. So again, the focus from the direct side is going to be brand consistency, large accounts, global accounts. That's really where their presence is for the most part. And again, they have a more blanketed approach to create that type of consistency. And again, they're going to be a little bit slower to respond to market changes because they're just much, much, much larger organizations that have to take into account everything that's happening all across the world. The independent dealer channel is we're looking for high local market penetration, as well as, again, the larger dealers looking to expand into national footprints and provide that. For us, it's all about customer retention, service and support, and the customization of it to meet what those needs are for those businesses. So again, if you're looking for a more consistent approach and you've got very large footprint, again, direct might be a good route to go. If you're looking for a more customized approach that's going to meet business needs across different areas, and I work with several customers that their need in one market's different than their need in another market, so we're bringing to them different products, different services, different ways of supporting it. Those are sort of the differences. So in summary, because I'm running up against the clock, I keep looking at it. I got 3 minutes, and I think I can get this done in less than that. In summary, again, the direct channel is going to be they're OEM-owned companies. They are the companies that make this stuff. They are going to be single brand, so they're going to provide you a product line that they manufacture. They're going to focus mostly on large enterprise national accounts with global footprint. Flexibility is going to be a little bit lower based on the fact that they want to have really good consistency across everywhere that they do business. They do have the service and support. They have the engineers. If it's a product or product specific or firmware or driver thing that you need, they're the ones that are going to have the best control over that. They're the ones that do all that work. Their pricing structures are going to be a little bit less flexible, and their strategic control is going to be centralized. They are going to work from a singular place to try to service the globe. The independent dealer channel is going to be privately owned business. We are OEM authorized. We can offer up multiple products, so we're not going to be bound to just one product. And again, high focus on SMB to mid-market space, as well as larger organizations when you deal with some of the larger dealers across the country. We have high flexibility. We're very locally driven. We focus on what our customers are asking us for and then finding the right product to meet that need. And again, we have all of our employees are all local. They all work in the towns that you have all your locations. We're going to be easier to negotiate, and we're much more decentralized in our approach towards that. I hope that provided some insight. I hope that gives you some food for thought. And again, appreciate everyone's attendance. Our contact information's on the invites. If you have any questions or any other topics you'd like to hear us talk about, please don't hesitate for a second to reach out and ask. Again, our goal is to try to give some insight. This will probably be the most biased of the ones that I do, just because I'm talking about dealer versus direct. I am in the dealer channel. But again, appreciate everybody's time. Have a great day. And I hope you got something from this.